Sam Raimi Spider-Man films had made Sony richer,
Billions of dollars.
but left its director feeling poorer.
There is an element of him being disappointed of how the third one turned out.
Well, they can't hate you.
Months of development hell on Spider-Man 4 had left the director bereft.
Sam was just like, look, this is turning into the thing I didn't want it to turn into.
Plans for the next Spider-Man lay in tatters.
All of a sudden, we just got the call that things were shut down.
Good riddance.
But with the clock counting down on the rights, the studio needed Spidey to spin a new web, and fast.
They can't let the rights go back to Marvel.
The race was on,
They absolutely were racing the clock.
but this was also an arms race with Sony's frenemy, Marvel.
You know, I always compared it to, like, the Cold War.
With Marvel breathing down its neck, Sony needed a new director,
He didn't have any track record for action.
a new look,
She was trying to push it in a different direction.
Not too much bravado.
and most of all, a new Spider-Man.
The pressure of taking on that part was far heavier on Andrew.
I needed Spidey in my life.
I was most dubious because he's British.
Seriously?
And just when they thought they had it all lined up,
There was a tremendous amount of secrecy.
a new villain entered the story.
What the hell did you just do?
And his bad guys weren't coming for Spider-Man.
Sony is actively investigating a North Korean link to this hacking attack.
They were coming to burn the house down.
There's a lot of really personal stuff that was disclosed.
I mean, I thought it was an act of terror.
By 2010, Marvel was on a roll, and a man by the name of Kevin Feige was orchestrating the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But he was missing one major ingredient.
I know Kevin really wanted to have Spider-Man be part of the MCU.
What was that about the MCU?
Marvel was going to start pulling characters into each other's films.
Building and building and building to Avengers.
But the Avengers without Spider-Man? It's hard to imagine.
And you know Spider-Man should be there.
So for Marvel, it was clear.
We need Spider-Man.
But of course, Marvel didn't own the film rights to Spider-Man because, as we know, Sony bought them.
We ended up paying $10 million for Spider-Man.
But it made no sense for Sony to give up their most successful character.
Remember, for Sony, it was all about the Spider-nomics.
The reality is that Sony Pictures economics are directly tied to when a Spider-Man film is released.
They needed Spider-Man more than anything else because they had no other franchise to invest in. So they had to hold on to it, come hell or high water.
And with Marvel hungry to get Spider-Man back, Sony's only choice was to release a new Spider-Man movie.
They can't just sit on the rights of Spider-Man and not produce a movie. If they were to do that, then the rights would revert back to Marvel.
They can't let the rights go back to Marvel. They have to make a film. I believe it's like 5 years, 9 months between films.
The 5-year clause was all that allowed Sony to keep Spider-Man. And by 2010, Sony was already running behind on their next installment.
It's a very large amount of money involved and a lot of pressure.
But just another Spider-Man movie was no longer enough. The MCU had changed the game.
That's why they felt like, we've got to reboot.
With new actors, a new director, and heading in a new direction. But that film was going to compete with the legacy of the 3 films that had come before it, judging essentially how good they're going to be at bringing that story to life.
The stakes were high, but at least Sony were managing their expectations.
We want a new Spider-Man, completely different, but kind of the same, cheaper and better.
That seems reasonable. Anything else?
Don't screw it up.
Of course. But for Sony, being creative with Spider-Man was complicated. As complicated as their relationship with Marvel.
Marvel didn't have full creative rights, but had consultation rights.
Sony's chair, Amy Pascal, knew this was a case of keeping your friends close and your enemies closer.
I can't imagine there was anyone at Sony who didn't look at Kevin Feige and what he built at Marvel and say, maybe he could do that here?
Kevin wasn't necessarily prepared to do that for Sony. But he did want to ensure that Sony didn't spoil Marvel Comics' most lucrative character.
I always compared it to, like, like the Cold War. You have two sides, but it was in everyone's best interest to figure out a way to work together on this and make it work.
And no one would know that better than Tom, who was Kevin Feige's hand-picked representative.
I should start off by saying I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. Even before I got to work on anything Spider-Man related, I cold emailed Kevin Feige and just introduced myself and said, hey, I'm a huge Marvel fan, even bigger Spider-Man fan. If you're looking out to build your team, I'd love to come over there. And I was part of the early team that was like doing the MCU. He just asked me to be like Marvel's representative to the studio.
And so Sony Studios began to develop a new take on Spider-Man. But the question was, how new?
Now, there were multiple versions of Spider-Man scripts that had belonged to Sony over the years.
And this version needed a punch-up, so they hired writer James Vanderbilt.
James Vanderbilt ends up working on the screenplay for The Amazing Spider-Man.
But what Vanderbilt was writing would take Spider-Man deeper into his own tangled web of emotions.
That leaned heavier into the teenage version of Peter with a grounded, authentic, emotionally driven tone and the relationships that he had.
But relationships and emotions could only mean one thing. Emo Spider-Man was back. And this time it would be more than just a haircut.
Sony wanted to get back to that root level of Peter Parker.
And to do so, Sony would take its cue from the MCU. Because just as Marvel had brought on indie darling Jon Favreau to direct their first installment in Iron Man, their choice in director proved they were willing to take Spider-Man in a new direction.
They went out and get this guy, Mark Webb.
It was sort of a surprise choice.
Can you believe his name is Webb and he's directing Spider-Man?
At the time, he was an up-and-coming director. You know, he had done 500 Days of Summer. That was a great young romance movie.
This thing, what are we doing?
He didn't have any track record or reputation for action or adventure or thrills.
He hadn't been a part of anything like Spider-Man.
If Mark Webb's new emo Spider-Man was going to be different than his predecessors, then Spider-Man would need to look different as well. Making that happen was this woman's job.
My name's Kim Barrett. I'm a costume designer.
Like her director, Kim had to find a new angle on something iconic.
I thought, I just want to try and do it without looking at too much.
She was trying to push it in a different direction, I guess, put her own stamp.
Assisting was specialty superhero costume designer Jose Fernandez.
I was asked to come on board with Kim Barrett, and she asked if I would help her with technical things.
And Jose and Kim would hit the ground running.
I started doing the design of the suit before we had an actor.
But the first person to wear the suit wasn't the Spider-Man actor, it was this man.
So I got called up, and it turns out it's for some Spider-Man thing, and so I just don't think anything of it. I was on my way out, and I was just maybe I should show them my free running reel. I show them my reel, and they're oh, cool, all right, see you later. So I leave, and then, I don't know, a week later or something like that, and I get this phone call. This person's just hey, so just want to let you know that we're gonna book you for Spider-Man to be the stunt double. I was oh, cool, some little toy commercial or something, right? No, we want to book you to be the stunt double for the Amazing Spider-Man movie. And I just my head exploded. They sent me to Montreal to Cirque du Soleil headquarters.
I'd just been doing a lot of work with Cirque du Soleil, and I knew if I was going to get anyone to make 100 stretchy suits, they'd be really good.
They had this 3D scanning machine, and they just did all these 3D scans of me.
And I really wanted the web design to look like, it's almost like they were blown onto his body. I think what sets this suit apart from the other ones.
Of course, there was one other detail that would make this suit iconic.
We spent a lot of time working on the actual eyes.
It should be something that a teenager made on his own.
Mark wanted that aesthetic.
Essentially pops lenses out of sunglasses.
That's why also the eyes are so small, because you only can get so much out of them.
But these cool shades came in a weird way from another dimension.
A friend of mine who did the glasses for me on The Matrix helped make the lenses. So they were etched with a gold texture on them, but you could see through them.
And while Toby's suit had him gasping for air,
he's claustrophobic, and he literally tore it off.
Comfort was key for this new Spidey outfit.
I always make sure the gloves can come off. I always make sure that whatever they're wearing on their head can come off really easily. If they're feeling uncomfortable or hot or worried or anxious, I like for them to be able to start to take it off for themselves.
And with those clever little details, the look of the next generation Spider-Man was set.
First time I put the suit on, I can still remember it. Get this feeling of this responsibility, I'm Spider-Man. Okay, this is real.
But little did he know that doing it for real was about to literally drive him up a wall. Director Mark Webb and Sony were going for something different with the reboot of Spider-Man, trying at every opportunity to separate themselves from the Sam Raimi films. But there was one thread to Spider-Man that would become a particular sticking point.
Spinning the web and throwing it, on those sort of things, everybody's got an input on it.
Should Spider-Man's web fire from a mechanical contraption on his wrist, or more magically from within?
We thought, okay, if you're gonna do these movies over, just find ways to really separate them from the earlier version, We want to show Peter's science abilities and his smarts and really explore that.
What the hell is this? Webbing that I developed myself.
They were probably getting tired of me sending emails and memos about the mechanical web shooters.
Marvel got their way, marking a return to the logic of the original comics. And while Mark was breaking with Raimi on the nature of Spidey's webs, like Sam before him, Webb didn't want any more digital than necessary.
Mark and the filmmaking team really felt strongly that let's really have some real web-swinging action in this movie rather than have it be all CGI.
Raimi's trilogy had seen some amazing progress in CGI Spidey.
Spider-Man was getting a little bit too cartoony. You were starting to lose the thread of credibility, if you can be credible about somebody's having a spider's web and swinging through the air.
Sure you can, if you tap into something completely off the wall.
That was when parkour was really hitting the highlights, and that was big on our list, because that's what Spider-Man does.
Which is to say, what David does.
If you can get that guy to do that as his base core talent, and then you can enhance it, it's fantastic.
The new Spidey was certainly moving in the right direction, but the big question was still to be answered. Who would play the new Spider-Man?
It's really the $1 million question.
Casting Peter was a challenge because so many young actors were up for it.
Two names that you hear are Jamie Bell, who was coming off of Billy Elliot. You also heard Logan Lerman, and then you hear Andrew Garfield.
Andrew was relatively new to the business.
He had a standout part in The Social Network.
There was a lot of handshaking, a lot of congratulations.
And there was something very similar about the position that he and Mark Webb were in because they hadn't done anything like this before, and they were going through the same thing together, and I think there was a unification for both of them.
But it was in the screen test that Andrew got to prove his dramatic chops.
Kind of had a moodiness. He was kind of more like the James Dean version of Peter Parker.
Of course, James Dean was quintessentially American. Garfield was, well...
He's British?
Well, just to be clear, although he was born in the US, he had grown up in the UK, meaning Andrew would have to do a New York accent.
Hey, watch out! I'm swinging here!
It's rough. It's not the best. He's really laying it on.
I'm walking here!
But unlike Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield could speak Spidey's language.
Unlike Tobey Maguire, Andrew was a Spider-Man fan from his earliest days.
Sony and Marvel believed enough to feel confident Andrew Garfield's slender shoulders could bear the burden of expectation.
The pressure of taking on that part was far heavier on Andrew because he understood the weight of expectation that came with the character in a way that Tobey never could have felt.
This new Spider-Man would retell his origin story as he pursued the mystery of his parents' disappearance and found himself on a collision course with a brand new villain. But who or what would Spidey be facing this time?
Criticisms that were being leveled at Spider-Man 3 was that the villains became the story and it overwhelmed elements of Peter Parker and Spider-Man that the audiences had connected with in the early days of Tobey Maguire.
To avoid that, the Amazing Spider-Man had a strict one villain per superhero limit.
Rhys Ifans played Dr. Kurt Connors,
also known as the Lizard.
It's disgusting.
He's, at least to comic book fans, one of the best-known Spider-Man villains. But I think he has this really empathetic backstory. He didn't set out to become this evil guy. He was trying to come up with a great cure for humanity.
He's a scientist who has lost his arm.
Disappointing.
But in an effort to grow it back, he accidentally turned himself into something he didn't want to be.
He's a giant humanoid lizard, and those things are always popular.
Poor Peter Parker.
Coincidentally, Evans was also from the UK, more specifically Notting Hill. Well, at least the movie.
During his audition, Rhys Ifans actually fell to the floor, writhing and convulsing. It was so convincing, Avi Arad rushed over to see if he actually needed to go to the hospital.
He fooled Avi.
But it wasn't just the villain getting a revamp. For the Amazing Spider-Man's leading lady, producers had decided they wanted a female character who wasn't so easily picked off.
Mary Jane gets kidnapped by every villain in the 3 Tobey Maguire movies.
They didn't want to just do, run it back with Peter Parker and MJ too, which is why the female lead in these films is Gwen Stacy.
Last seen, of course, in Raimi's 3rd film.
Hi, Pete.
Sony was once again going to take a character in a new direction.
Emma Stone was up and coming and really popular and great actress, and she was great, in the role.
Gwen is far more formidable. She's as smart as Peter is.
Rounding out the cast, Sony looked to bring in big stars in hopes of capturing a big audience.
You have Martin Sheen playing Uncle Ben. You have Sally Field as Aunt May.
Your father was a very secretive man.
It was another one of the creative discussions that was being made. Is like, let's make Aunt May younger.
They are much better known, I think, to modern audiences than Cliff Robertson and Rosemary Harris were.
What's that all about?
There was more star power in those kinds of roles.
But one role that wasn't so well known would be played by...
My name is C. Thomas Howell, and I played Jack's dad on The Amazing Spider-Man.
As a standout actor in many of the 80s biggest hits, C. Thomas Howell saw this as an opportunity to work with an up-and-coming director like Mark Webb.
Of course, I was a fan of 500 Days of Summer, and Mark had a real incredible ability to communicate. He, I think, had a real grip on what it was that he wanted to do.
And what he wanted to do was portray a new, more emotionally complex Peter Parker.
Okay, no, forget that. I'm not gonna talk about that. I'm gonna talk about me, okay?
With a new look for Spider-Man.
You seriously think I'm a cop? Cop in a skin-tight red and blue suit.
A new hook for Spider-Man. And even a new lizard.
Won't stop me again.
But whether Andrew Garfield and Mark Webb's new Spider-Man could catch an audience in his web remained to be seen. As the cameras began rolling on The Amazing Spider-Man in December of 2010, Vic Armstrong was tasked with bringing this new Spidey to life.
Anytime there's action, that's what we do, because we're more equipped and more used to doing it than the main units.
One night I went to the set and they set up this huge rigging structure.
So they took a fire truck and they ripped the water tank off of it, built this truss system, and so I'm able to swing and swing and swing.
We went back to the early Tarzan films, where you see Johnny Weissmuller swinging through the jungle, and he changes hands on the ropes, but when you think about it, exactly the same as what Spider-Man's doing. He's going ping, swinging, ping.
The difference between practical and CG, when it's practical, it just feels and looks real to you.
But as Dave would learn firsthand, often what felt real was real.
I'm supposed to run through these lanes of traffic, chase down this pickup truck. And so I'm just swinging through the streets of New York, and this one stunt guy comes up to me. You got 2 cars coming this way, 2 cars going that way, and this camera car behind you chasing you. Don't fall. And I was just like, oh, this has consequences.
But David's tasks weren't all so dangerous. He was also involved in this more intimate scene.
Another one of my favorite scenes was this car thief scene. It was a very famous stuntman, Keith Campbell.
There I was trying to steal a car and he shows up in my back seat.
You know, in the future, if you're gonna steal cars, don't dress like a car thief, man.
That's the first time they had shot off the lot and there were paparazzi getting some good pictures. The main one was Spider-Man on my shoulders, but facing me.
Surely no one could joke about an image like that.
The caption under it was, wow, I guess they put a zipper in the Spider-Man suit this time or something. It was very rude and funny.
Wrapping production on The Amazing Spider-Man on budget and on time, Mark Webb and his crew were riding high. That is, until news came in that one of Spider-Man's staunchest supporters had passed.
Laura Ziskin, for me, was
She was a really close friend and collaborator, was a personal mentor. I learned so much from her.
A near constant creative presence, the producer lost her battle with breast cancer on June 12, 2011.
Right until the end, you know, even when she couldn't come to set, I was like, you know, what about this? What about that? What do you think?
Laura was one of a kind. I mean, I have so much respect for her.
Just a very, very, very wonderful person. The world is a lesser place without her.
And while Spider-Man's journey from comic book to screen wouldn't have been possible without Laura Ziskin, Mark Webb and his team continued on, as there was plenty to do before The Amazing Spider-Man could hit cinemas. And although it was Sony's movie, Marvel was never far away.
They would invite me over, and sometimes Kevin would come too to see cuts of the film and give them feedback and notes. And Kevin just starts like riffing thoughts and ideas. Like he's just has this like innate ability. You know, that's one of the great things about Kevin.
And some of those ideas were starting to bring Spider-Man closer to the MCU.
I think people on both sides that thought, hey, yeah, what if we hint that these movies are taking place in the same universe?
Both parties could see the benefit of laying some Easter eggs to excite the fandom.
Could we put the Oscorp building in the background of Avengers, or put Stark Tower in the Spider-Man movie, you know? Even though that didn't happen, that was the start of the conversations. There was a real desire on both sides to make Spider-Man part of the MCU.
While Sony fine-tuned their new Spider-Man, they needed a way to introduce their new Peter Parker to the world. And at 2011's Comic-Con, Andrew Garfield had just the idea.
The Amazing Spider-Man.
This was their first step forward from a publicity standpoint of here's the new guy playing Spider-Man. And there was so much pressure.
Garfield, new, little-known, English accent, was already thinking about the most Spider-Man way to announce his arrival.
And Andrew has this idea. He wanted to wear a store-bought costume and appear at the podium asking a question to the Comic-Con panel. And then he would take off his mask and show everybody that it was him, Andrew Garfield.
We're not going to take questions just yet.
No, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I just quickly... I think this might be the most incredible day of my life.
The minute he took his mask off, the fans went nuts.
So thanks for having me.
It was a neat moment. I think a lot of people, fans, like ate it up.
You have no idea. You have no idea how much this means to me.
But not all publicity events went according to plan. Like when C. Thomas Howell was prompted on a radio interview.
Tell us about your character. And I started discussing that I was a construction worker and my son is put into a perilous situation and there's a big battle on this bridge between Spider-Man and the Lizard. Both the jocks on the radio station go, wait, the Lizard?
And those two tiny words,
the Lizard? The Lizard?
unleashed a flurry of activity.
My phone has been ringing nonstop. I've got attorneys on the phone, Sony's on the phone. I had to write apology letters. I had no idea that was some big secret. They were so mad at me, my God.
But it wasn't all bad. With excitement around the film reaching its apex, Sony greenlit The Amazing Spider-Man 2 almost a full year before the first film's release. But first things first, the premiere of The Amazing Spider-Man, hitting cinemas July 2012. And The Amazing Spider-Man did amaze plenty of fans.
So you were always going to get Spider-Man fans who were going to turn out for the movie no matter what.
Audiences were quickly endeared to Andrew.
They did a great job casting that whole movie.
Andrew Garfield's a great actor, and I think Emma Stone's great.
Her and Andrew kicked it off really naturally. Just a natural chemistry I thought was really lovely.
That part of it was more successful than some of the action, even some of Peter's character stuff.
Easy, bug boy.
And even though fans were connecting with Andrew and Emma, lethargy was sinking in around Spider-Man himself.
Felt like, to many, that it was way too soon to do another film that retells Peter Parker's origin story so soon on the heels of the Raimi versions, which did it.
Great reflexes.
Good reflexes.
Seriously?
Fans agreed Garfield's new Spider-Man was cool.
I thought he was cooler than Tobey Maguire.
And that was exactly the problem.
Well, the whole essence of Peter Parker is he's not cool. And the cooler he is, the less of a need there is for Spider-Man. Because the whole reason for Spider-Man is to cover up the fact that he's such a hapless nerd.
The movie wasn't really well received. It ended up making not nearly as much money as the previous Sam Raimi films.
But globally, it was still one of the biggest hits of summer 2012 for Sony.
Landing in the 700 million worldwide range, acceptable. Not smash hit, but acceptable for Sony.
That meant Mark Webb was invited back for the sequel. But what was coming out of Marvel would raise expectations on the 39-year-old director starkly. Mark Webb was back to direct The Amazing Spider-Man 2. However, the franchise faced competition, to put it mildly.
Avengers is a worldwide event. It has the highest grossing opening weekend of all time.
Smash.
And the success of Marvel got Sony thinking.
You had Marvel that you were competing with. Well, all Sony had was Spider-Man.
If Marvel could do it, why couldn't they?
How quickly can we build a cinematic universe?
And they wanted to kind of introduce all these other characters.
The studio that had once turned down an offer of
$25 million for 25 Marvel properties.
In order to focus on one,
I thought it was a mistake. I believe I told them they were fucking idiots.
Now wanted to unleash a mob.
So let's just throw everything we can at it.
You're hearing about Jamie Foxx being cast as Electro. You're hearing about Dane DeHaan being cast as the Green Goblin. You're hearing about Felicity Jones being added to the cast to become the Black Cat later on. They hired Chris Cooper to play Norman Osborn, and of course you see an actor of Chris Cooper's caliber and you're thinking, well, obviously they're going to use him for, future parts in upcoming movies.
But before they could get to those future movies, they would need a story for The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man is a character who loses and comes back. He'll never give up. So he's going to have scenes where he loses.
And luckily, Tom had an idea about loss.
Hey, if you're gonna have Gwen Stacy, this is like one of the most impactful comic book stories ever.
Tom was petitioning Sony to include the one Gwen Stacy story still talked about by fans to this day.
It's hard to overstate how shocking that was in the comics. I mean, it was an astonishingly bold thing to do.
Which begged the question, could Sony afford to be so bold?
To kill off one of your main characters, you don't often see that in these kinds of movies. But again, I think that they had to do something to shake it up and make audiences really feel Peter Parker's anguish.
We decided to make Gwen Stacy's death part of the storyline.
Oh, please, please.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was getting filled to the brim. But little did Sony know that their quest for more might turn out to be the very web that ensnared them.
Whoa, guys, did we not learn what went wrong with Spider-Man 3, where we packed it with villains and lost focus on the hero? Is this going to be a problem already before the movie even starts?
But a bloated rogues gallery of villains wasn't the only thing Mark Webb was doing differently the second time around.
The Amazing Spider-Man 1 shot all into the back lot.
When was the last time you were in Queens?
Mark wasn't going to do that this time. He wanted it to feel authentic, saying, we're going to shoot in New York.
But in 2012, shooting on the streets of New York presented a new danger.
This is the rise of spoiler culture, and shooting out in public like that just becomes a nuisance.
They were very concerned all through shooting that oh my God, you can't let the public know what the Spider-Man suit is, the paparazzi. So he would wear a hooded garment around going to set.
But what exactly did Sony have under wraps?
They wanted the costume to be very much honoring the source material.
That gave veteran costume designer Deborah Lynn Scott,
let's go back to basics,
and suit sculptor Jose Fernandez a simple mission.
I just want to make it my imagery from my childhood, classic Spidey.
That meant bringing to the screen a practical incarnation of a look only ever designed for 2 dimensions.
To reinvent that in a 3-dimensional movie form was a challenge. In the comic, he does have quite large eyes. It took a lot of time and work to get to that. You can make these big giant eyes, but can the actor see? So we discovered really early on it would just be a matter of if they were a little closer together.
You're my eyes and ears out here, all right?
All right.
That looked like the comic book, that also flattered Andrew's face, was really the main brief.
Jose and Deborah knew they'd achieved a classic look when Marvel execs locked eyes with the new webhead in the flesh.
And I remember Avi leaning over and telling me it was perfect and saying, we never need to change it again. For him, he's done. I'm like, that's what I thought too. It was a great moment.
Great for Jose, at least, because where Kim had focused on the suit's wearability,
I always make sure the gloves can come off.
Jose was honed in on the final result.
Within a minute of that conversation, I heard Andrew say, "I can't wait to get this fucking thing off of me." He was so miserable in the suit.
Webb's push for a more tactile world meant putting down some of the filmmaker's most powerful tools, especially when it came to his villains.
In Amazing Spider-Man 1, we had the lizard, but it was all digital. Just never felt alive.
Howard Berger had the task of making an analog Electro for a digital world.
I worked hand in hand with Jerome Chen, who was our visual effects supervisor. He said, anything you can do will save us tons of time, tons of money. And I'm like, well, let's do the full Monty. I want to do a full makeup. It was a great combination of all the crafts, all the disciplines working together.
And during Electro's big introduction, second unit director John Mahaffey had the very big task of merging the digital and the very real world.
We built the basis of Times Square in the backlot on Long Island.
And shooting in a controlled environment allowed for some practical camera tricks courtesy of John.
It was quite a challenge to work out how we shoot the moment in time that there is about to be an electrical charge all the way through the bleachers. We froze that moment in time and everyone was moving at full speed. What would happen?
They had a plan to capture it practically, but regular actors wouldn't cut it for the job.
We said all the people on the bleachers are dancers, to be able to hold positions.
I think that was a lot of it, just the fact of their familiarity with their own bodies and how they could strike a pose and hold it.
And everyone had light clothing so that we could wire it, or hair that stuck out.
They had to really lock the hair so it didn't blow or move.
I worked out the travel of the camera. It felt like we zipped to another moment and then zipped to another moment. The whole shot is virtually practical, but works very well.
And some of the ideas they were using would come from a surprising place.
I love silent movies. Harold Lloyd and Keaton, they're really pertinent because those guys were really inventive. They had to come up with smart ideas.
There's a little sequence where Spider-Man grabs hold of the handle and is pulled onto the back of the vehicle and takes off. And we did that for real, based on a piece of physical action from Buster Keaton. We were trying to put in a physicality that really grounded that in reality.
When it came to keeping things grounded, nothing loomed larger than Gwen Stacy's impending fate. And John had a plan that would turn everything on its head. When it came to Gwen Stacy's deathly plummet, second unit director John Mahaffey was happy to defy the laws of physics.
And one of the tricks that I have is to turn things upside down. So we would put the blue screen on the ceiling of the set. We'd put the camera right down on the ground. And the trick for it being upside down rather than the other way around is if she was falling away, her hair would fall to the ground. So by doing it this way, all her hair and her clothing is falling to camera. Gravity is actually working for you rather than against you. You're actually using them to your enhancement. Combined with the brutality of our darling stunt woman who does the final profile shot, makes that sequence one of those quintessential moments that I'm thrilled to have been involved in.
When Emma dies, I watched that on set, and it was heartbreaking.
Possibly because this scene had more in it than most.
It's very real.
Emma and Andrew were already a real item, continuing a tradition of leads in love that began on Spider-Man and wasn't done yet.
Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone didn't see each other for a week leading up to shooting that scene, so that when they got to that point,
stay with me,
there would be some raw element to it.
In the sequel to The Amazing Spider-Man, Sony had some people it wanted us to meet. They were a few mysterious new characters.
What's your name?
Felicia.
Sony was putting together the basic elements of something it believed could rival the MCU.
The Spider-Verse.
There was an agenda for these various characters that we were introducing, but it was evolving as a concept.
Sony was looking for ways to continue making, superhero movies and Spider-Man movies, but without necessarily watering down Spider-Man himself.
In December 2013, Sony publicly committed to its Spider-Verse by announcing more films.
Sony announced release dates for Amazing Spider-Man 3 and 4. They hired Drew Goddard to direct a Sinister Six movie.
They're working on a Venom movie.
Good for people like Andrew Garfield.
Andrew Garfield was guaranteed to get at least 2 more Spider-Man movies, in addition to this Sinister Six film that he was going to pop up in.
But was it good for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 to be so chock full of story potential? One educated onlooker didn't think so.
I would give them notes, but then I remember Kevin coming in. He definitely gave them constructive feedback on the movie.
Feige sent notes over to Amy Pascal that said, this is a disaster.
Feige, the guru of cinematic universe building, felt certain Sony was building too much, too fast.
One of his most significant notes was, get rid of the parent spy plotline at the beginning of this movie.
Audiences would get to decide whether the story of Spidey's long-dead parents mattered when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was released.
The Amazing Spider-Man movies come out, and they're not doing as well as they would have liked.
The sequel made $202 million at the US box office, $60 million shy of its predecessor.
I was actually kind of taken aback by the reaction. Critics just kind of piled on it.
And the audiences are not as emotionally invested in the characters.
I thought, it
was just underwhelming.
You're a fraud, Spider-Man! I thought, there was a lot of great set pieces, in the movie.
People just weren't happy with what they did.
And that meant they weren't lining up for more travels in the Spider-Verse.
You ready to give up?
We were very excited about the potential of all coming back and doing another movie. And then the studio decided not to move forward on another Spider-Man movie in that universe.
As Sony chair Amy Pascal contemplated Spider-Man's future, she concluded more of the same would only lead to more of the same. To take Spider-Man to another level, Sony needed to break the mold.
Marvel and Sony realized that if we're gonna do another Spider-Man movie, we need to rethink. That's when efforts were heating up to bring Spider-Man into the MCU.
Ultimately, it became clear to Amy Pascal that they were not going to be able to compete with Marvel. They were going to have to cooperate with them and figure out some way to play nice with this character that they owned, that Marvel wanted, and they were going to have to figure out some way to creatively collaborate moving forward.
I think by necessity had to start over.
But exactly how Spider-Man could travel into the MCU without completely leaving Sony's orbit would need to be carefully negotiated. Amy reached out to Kevin.
They met for lunch.
Amy Pascal said, we could use your help in making the next Spider-Man movie.
And Kevin kind of knew that Amy was over a barrel and needed to cooperate.
Sony's overture was a golden opportunity for Marvel to finally bring Spider-Man home and unify its characters within the MCU.
Feige said, I don't know how to help in half measures. Let me and my team make this film for you. We'll produce it and you put it out. Amy Pascal, who is the creative force behind these Spider-Man films, did not love that response, and she threw a sandwich at him to express her displeasure.
She throws what?
That is the rumor, that she threw a sandwich at him.
I could see her doing that. Good for her.
Evidently, Amy preferred to share her sandwich rather than Sony's golden goose.
You don't share your assets, potentially make money for a rival. And you don't pull the plug on a franchise if it has gas in the tank.
While Sony had few good options, Andrew was sitting in limbo.
Andrew's kind of being strung along. It's stopping him from getting other jobs because he doesn't quite know if he needs to be ready to start filming on a Spider-Man movie.
And while Sony was working out what to do with its biggest movie property, one of its smaller releases, called The Interview, an action comedy about the assassination of, this guy.
Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un. We are talking about Kim Jong-un.
Put Sony in hot water, to say the least.
Apparently, he was not amused.
And the fallout would change the script for everyone. In November of 2014, no one could have guessed that for Seth Rogen's The Interview, this small comedy was destined to become a big tragedy.
Babe.
Kim! Tonight, the FBI is on the case, and they are warning big companies in America to protect their data.
As I understand it, he had his hackers break into Sony and release embarrassing emails as retaliation.
I mean, I thought it was an act of terror.
It certainly terrified Sony executives, whose commercially sensitive plans for Spider-Man and Marvel were laid bare.
The minute that the fans realized that Amy was at least flirting with the idea, it became a relentless campaign of Sony give Spider-Man back to Marvel. They made such a ruckus of Marvel's doing it correct. Give Spider-Man to Marvel.
Caught in the crossfire was Amy Pascal, whose private musings were suddenly swirling around the internet.
I think it was really tough for Amy.
There were some ugly emails that sort of came out with her name on them.
There's a lot of really personal stuff that was disclosed that made it hard for Amy to do her job, and really hard.
Severely compromised, Amy's days were numbered.
Ultimately, that entire management team moved on.
Down but not out, Amy had one last play, and so she began talks with Disney, who had purchased Marvel Entertainment for $4 billion in 2009.
Disney came in saying, hey, well, let's cut a deal.
I think it was just, everyone realized it's in our mutual best interest to figure out a way to make this work.
Within months, a deal was agreed, and there was only one word for it.
When they cut the deal, that was pretty special.
I mean, this was the deal that all the fans had been waiting for.
It was a big deal. Like, I knew it meant a lot to Kevin.
So they worked out a deal where they would share Spider-Man with the current Marvel Cinematic Universe for at least 5 films. Disney kept the merchandising rights to the character. They also allowed Marvel to have complete creative control over the character.
And what did Sony get?
Sony kept all of the film's profit.
But only on standalone Spider-Man films, and actually not all the profit.
Disney did get one other thing, which is 5% of the film's profits were paid back to Disney.
Marvel's prodigal son had finally returned home, and everyone was happy.
Sony was happy to be getting the film profits, and Marvel was happy to have Spider-Man to be able to use in their universe.
It was a Hollywood ending for Spider-Man, but also the beginning of a new chapter.
He was going to, be fighting alongside the Avengers and everything.
They were starting with Captain America: Civil War.
Hey, everyone.
Actually, there was one unhappy customer.
Avi was furious. To him, it was preposterous to give away rights to Spider-Man to anybody else, even Kevin Feige.
But there was someone possibly even more committed to Spider-Man than Avi Arad.
Amy Pascal. She's a force of nature.
And she had a plan to stick with Spidey.
She has survived for decades in this business.
Cast out from Sony, Amy Pascal formed her own company to work with Marvel shepherding Spider-Man through the MCU.
She's become the gatekeeper of the character.
Meaning her name would still be in the credits. And as for the man himself, the man inside the suit, he was suddenly released from limbo.
Thank you for being here and sharing it with me.
Or Andrew Garfield. He was not asked to continue.
One of the most passionate custodians of the Spider-Man suit was forced to hang it up.
I always thought he was a great Peter Parker, and I was always kind of bummed that he didn't get to do his third Spider-Man movie.
But as Marvel took the reins on this next iteration of Spider-Man,
it was the mum and dad of it. One had the purse strings and one had the creative vision.
This new marriage would prove to be far from harmonious.
Marvel was going to be the creative lead, and Sony was financing it. That's always a slightly scary proposition.